All right, everybody. This is the April 8th Working Group LTS meeting. Half the people are exhausted from getting back from KubeCon, and half the people are refreshed from having a quiet week while everyone else was gone at KubeCon. So we're going to kick things off, and Micah was going to talk through some of the things from the proposal that we talked about last time. All right.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah, so I missed the last time, but I think it sounds like there's a lot of good feedback on just the idea here. I think the way that I would summarize this is the goals here are really to have a common place in the Kubernetes project for interested parties to contribute patches and maintain those patches. It's not for it's not, it would be very, we can make this very clear that this is not the regular Kubernetes that everyone has for all of the maintained versions. It won't have release artifacts. It won't have the same support from SIGs. It would really be a separate group of people maintaining patches to core K and only core K. So it wouldn't be etcd, it wouldn't be runc, containerd, all this other stuff. That would be up to independent distributors if they want to maintain those coordinated versions of other dependent projects and how they decide to do that. But it would be a community location for these patches to be maintained, rather than having each, because multiple distributors at this point are doing this already independently. And so it would be a coordinated place to do that. The idea being we would have tags to agree on, get tags to agree on what is a point release, without all the other release work that we do, and a different set of maintainers than core. So the owner's files on these branches that are maintained would be updated to be different than all the other maintainers. So it wouldn't be asking every SIG to keep maintaining their branch for long term. It would be up to this SIG to maintain branches. Because if you think about it, that's again what a number of distributors are already doing today. They're not necessarily coordinating with SIGs to get approval or buy-in or review on their past branches. And I think having that in a common space where more than one provider at a time can review those together seems valuable. So that's the sort of the core of the proposal. There are a lot of open questions that I don't know the answer to, but I like the motivation to put this out was to say what can we do to have something in the Kubernetes project to maintain this. Because the alternative being outside of the Kubernetes project, as say another CNCF project is, well, is it Kubernetes at that point? How does that work? Maybe that's possible, but I don't know. But I think it starts to become confusing when you say, oh, is this Kubernetes or is this Kubernetes LTS that's not maintained by any of the Kubernetes project? There are lots of things to work through here, but I think that's sort of the summarization, I think, of the document that folks have had a chance to read. I'd love to take questions.
You're up, Jeremy.
Jeremy,
You're
muted.
muted.
I wasn't muted, and then Slack, Zoom crashed, and I had to join again.
Are you sure it's only your Mac that hasn't gotten back on?
Yeah, no, I didn't have a great week. I was sick all week, so I'm recovering.
Oh, no.
Would you see this happening within like the existing KK repo, or would this be maybe a forked version of KK inside of the Kubernetes org?
Yeah, I'm open to either, honestly. Like if it, I don't think I'm not dogmatic to say it has to be KK. I think there are advantages if it's KK, just in that it's the same repo. There's disadvantages in that, like, there might be difficult for outside people to delineate what's the difference. I think a separate repo, it seems fine. Maybe in a different GitHub org, so you keep the same repo name for for various reasons. Again, those can be worked out, I think, but I don't have a strong opinion there.
Scoping it to like patch sets that people can contribute for issues that they are already adapting patches back to older minor branches for. Like that scoping, I think makes sense. Like having a way to share those, collaborate with those. Everything beyond like here's the patch for this issue for these branches. I would want to see evidence of like sustaining just making the patches available. So like whether we even merge them, whether we tag them, whether we run CI on them, whether we do build artifacts for them, whether we do docs for them, like everything downstream of just the work that we actually are already doing. Like we are having to adapt the patch to the branch. Beyond that, like share this, make sure, get more eyeballs on it, make it available for other people to pull it into a branch. Like if it's just a patch set, it's super clear. This is like, here's an adapted patch that we all kind of agree, matches the spirit or the effective change. But like it's very much you're on your own. Apply this to your branch, do your build, do your CI, do your like every time we do something like one more step, like we merge it or we tag it or we build it or we test it, like it gets blurrier and blurrier whether this is an officially supported thing, and it gets more and more expensive. So
I
would
definitely hear
start
you.
with just like here's the CVEs and there's a folder for every CVE and there's like a set of patches in the folder and that's it. That's where I would start at least.
Yeah, I think the maybe the one thing that I'm also trying to maintain here is the right level of ownership. Like I don't want every because we've heard pretty loudly that every SIG doesn't every trying to get buy-in from every SIG to maintain 2 additional years of releases, that's just not tenable. And that's a lot of stakeholders, and that's a lot of like work that sort of we're asking everyone to bear that not everyone's getting paid for and professionally paid for, and that's just probably not a model that's sustainable here. I think what I'm trying to do is try to differentiate the ownership of this from the core project and the core project owners. So the idea of what you're saying, Jordan, of like tagging and merging, tagging, potentially release or tests or anything, that would be all owned by that SIG. If that SIG decided not to do tests or to do releases, like that's the ownership of that SIG. Rather than have to push the ownership onto the whole project.
I'm just thinking about like the positioning of the thing. So you already said like it wouldn't include dependencies like a TD and stuff. What about like vendor dependencies? Like would it be doing go bumps and go mod updates of every random thing? Like in my mind, those things are already providing their own streams of Go's doing security updates and
Right.
Golang org modules and whatever modules, like they have their own updates. I would want to avoid trying to sort of ingest that and merge that into a Kubernetes branch as well, especially if we're not making release artifacts and everyone downstream is having to do their own builds anyway. Like just go straight to the source and pull the security updates from Go and from dependencies from there. But that implies that people are sort of taking the patches for Kubernetes vulnerabilities and then pulling them into their own build process along with the new Go version, along with whatever module dependency updates, and doing their own build and their own CI, which we are. So it just doesn't seem like a maintained branch where stuff is actually merging and getting tagged is adding that much value over like, oh, well, we're going to share and collaborate on the work to do the backports of the Kubernetes code changes and then publish the patch sets. And then if you want to pull those in, you can do that and it's super easy.
I think that the main benefit to having like merged patches in my mind is that like it's beyond just I get that having a folder of patches is functionally equivalent to to merging a PR. But for most people, it's not.
But the exact people who are going to be confused by that are the people we don't like. We don't want people just building off of head of this branch and thinking like everything about their build is great. Like it's not. You also need to bump Go. You need to bump dependencies. You need to do your testing. Like the little tiny bit of friction of like you have to apply the patch to your branch and do stuff. I think is a feature, not a bug of that approach, and it's less work. But there's other hands, Bridget and then Zachary.
Thanks. I hear a lot of discussion of like separate group, and maybe this will be under Kubernetes, but elsewhere, not KK. And I'm kind of drawn to the question of what are we talking about for ownership? When you have the word subproject on here, it makes me think, is this a SIG release subproject? Or do you think SIG LTS is its own thing? Like, how are we envisioning this being managed in terms of assuming it's under the Kubernetes governor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the answer, and I would love to hear like ideas. I think the initial proposal here is like I said subproject just because I don't know if it makes sense to be a SIG. Maybe it does make sense to be its own SIG, especially if it's owning code and owning a repo. My initial idea was, can it be a subproject of another SIG? I don't know which SIG that would be. I think I put in here maybe Arch or something, but like that was just an idea that wasn't a like firm. This is where it needs to be. I think I want that input on what is the right place, because I'm not sure. I think there's pros and cons, but I'd love to hear any input.
I mean, like the SIG security and the security response committee like already coordinates changes to Kubernetes code to fix security issues. Them having a repo or a folder where like those same changes
Do you mean
adapted
SRC?
to previous.
Do
Yeah,
you mean
SRC.
SRC, not SIG security? SIG security doesn't own code as far as I know.
I thought SRC was under.
Nope, that's a separate thing.
That's funny.
SRC is SRC.
Yeah. It's been too many years.
Well, SIG security
We're gonna pull
does
you
own
back
the
into-
CVE tooling. They own the little publishing for CVE.
Yeah. So
But
SIG security, or how about that, or SRC. Both of those they interact with like handling vulnerabilities, coordinating fixes to those, and publishing information about those. So I could like a subproject of either of those would seem sensible to me.
Do we have subprojects off of committees? I mean, if we do, I don't
We
know.
can do anything if we have the power. I don't know. It could be a process. Like I
Yeah.
don't really care.
Again, I'm not dogmatic about this. I don't have super strong opinions. I think the most strong opinion is that in my mind is to keep it in the Kubernetes project, because that's where the maintainers are. That's where like the support of the project is. You get yeah.
And also, like if we see this as a best effort kind of thing, we need to be clear about that.
Very.
So if SRC today is like coordinating with area owners to say like, we have this report, we need it fixed, we need it backported to whatever. Like who owns the best effortedness of the thing?
Yeah.
Like we have a gnarly change. And so like is SRC going to say like, if anyone wants to give us patches for older miners, we'll publish them here. And then distributors are like, well, yeah, we patched it back 3 more miners. So here's what we did. Here's what you did. Just ironing out how that works. And if it doesn't work, like if no one shows up, it's gnarly and it's crickets because it, was a niche config that maybe the distributors didn't care about. Like we don't enable that. We don't care about backporting a fix for it. It's like, how do we put a placeholder in there to say like, for this CVE, there is no available patch. Sorry, it's best effort.
Yeah, I think there'd be close coordination between SRC and this group, say, well, just for argument's sake, say SIG, to specify exactly that. It would be part of the like release announcements, or the maybe not release, but the CVE announcements. Yeah.
All right, Zach, you've been super patient. Sorry.
No worries. I noticed that some of the conversation seems to be about like what we want to do, and other parts of the conversation seem to be about how we want to do it. Is it a SIG? Is it a working group? Is it a committee? Do we want to put things in a directory? Do we put them on a branch? Do we put them in a separate Git repo? Would it be useful to kind of separate those discussions out and see if we're aligned about what we want to accomplish, and then figure out to accomplish that, like, and the relationships we want between that and other groups, like, does that look like a SIG or a working group or a sub project? I don't know. I can't tell if we're all aligned on the what before we're trying to align on the how.
The kernel of the proposal seems to be to share the work that we're already doing to adapt these patches back
That's right.
to the miners. So like that kernel, I think we're aligned on. Everything beyond that, I don't think we're aligned on. So yeah, go ahead, Rita.
Yeah, I think the how is the crux of it, right? Is and I just kind of want to remind everybody, like, whatever we decide to do, it needs, even if we don't cut releases, we must have some kind of PR gate. So that means there should be some CI, some minimal tests, right? Otherwise, how do you know if the backport is working or it's not introducing some bugs, right?
I don't know that that's a given. Like I honestly think the project can't afford to run and keep green CI on more branches. And so I would push, like I would say we're not we're not doing a great job running and keeping CI green on the branches we already have. What makes us think we can add more branches successfully? So I would push back on that and
Well,
say,
just to clarify, I again kind of echoing what Zach was saying, right? Like I'm just stating whatever the thing is, it should have some tests, like some PR gate. I'm not saying we should open up new branches to KK. That's, I feel like that's I don't think people have agreed to that. Like say Micah's comment earlier, like if it's a separate repo, having its own owner's file and doing the backporting, having different people reviewing it. In my mind, I still think even if we are not cutting releases, we need some kind of PR gate. That's all I'm saying.
like
And
the idea that it gets committed in
right,
some way, I think that's good. Like because then
right,
it requires
right.
the change
So
in
again,
review.
not saying KK, right? I'm saying, say if it's a fork and we do merge the commit, it should have some kind of PR gate. And this
Yeah.
is a problem we have in the SRC today, right? Like the
Right.
private thing, right?
Embargoed builds, exactly.
Yeah.
So
So
I'm
that's
plus one on merging things. The thing we merge is up for discussion, though. It could be literally a .patch file. So like the idea that there's a change and a review and a second LGTM and then something merges, so you have like a SHA associated with it. Like that's
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
Whether we're merging actual Go code to a branch or merging .patch files into a directory, I think both of those accomplish the core goal of
Sure.
sharing patch sets that we're making. And so there's pros and cons to the different approaches that.
Sure. But even if it's patch files, like how do we know it's there should be some kind of gating, right?
Maybe. I don't.
I think like the thing that I'm trying to do here is separate the ownership so that that SIG can determine
Right.
what they want, whether that's like does and a very simple example, does is it valid go, right? Like it might be not a great patch, but at least we can have that sort of sanity check. And that way it's separating from the responsibilities of all the other SIGs who have to do reviews, the burden of doing reviews. Like this would be for, say, I mean, hypothetically, we're talking another year. Just we haven't even talked about term yet, but just hypothetically, another year of branches. So another 3 branches. And so we're not talking, and we're also talking pretty constrained set of patches. We're not talking about like daily patches. We're talking about like maybe monthly for for 3 branches. So the CI amount of CI runs we're talking about is fairly low, and it would be up to the SIG to maintain those CI. It wouldn't be fall onto the main project in every SIG.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and the fewer especially if we're not doing like go bumps and vendor dependency bumps, like yeah, the number of patches goes way down. Experience shows when we have CI that we run rarely, it usually atrophies and breaks between runs. And so if we have a thing where like, oh, we only merge something every 3 months, like experience shows when we haven't run CI for 3 months, it will pretty much be read like half the time or most of the time when we do try to run it. And experience also shows that when we have a central team dealing with like red jobs whose definitions and tests originally came from SIGs, we're really bad at a central team even knowing like how to get a thing back to green. So we have like the release CI team who is stuck like tending red CI for release builds. And I mean, some of them are like super adept at digging into the guts of stuff, but often they're just like, it's red. I'm going to go to the Slack channel for the SIG and say like, your job is red. Like, I don't know why it's red. Your test is failing. Can you make it green? Please, please, please. Like, I'm skeptical that a central group is going to be able to do that better than we do today.
Actually, the more you talk, the more I'm like, this is very aligned with what SRC is trying to do right now, right? Which is trying to revamp the CI for the private KK. And I think the fact that you actually mentioned like, hey, maybe SRC could own the backporting, it's actually pretty aligned. And could we just reuse the CI for the private KK for this purpose? Though it is private, that's the part I don't like, right? Because it's not meant to be private. But the CI is the same though. We could reuse it.
I haven't seen the efforts to revamp that.
Well,
All I know is like we've
we
had
need
it for
to.
8 years and it's never worked ever.
But we need
So,
it, right? Like I think we all agree we need it. And what I'm saying is if we're doing it for the private KK, it could be used for this purpose as well.
you know,
Because that's the body that's like doing the patch files anyway, right? To your point.
yeah, I think the ownership of that is not super well defined. Like today, SRC pulls in SIG owners and they're expected to be responsive for patching issues in maintained branches. So like the ownership of taking that back further would not be super clear. But
I think one other point I just want to make is that I think the centralization is sort of the feature here of having not just the reviews, but also potentially some amount of testing. Like it would be up to the SIG to own those. Like providers are again already doing this independently.
And this won't save them any work. Like that's my point. Like whatever. So collaborating on a patch, like we have to adapt a patch. You have to adapt a patch. Like collaborating on that, I think that's useful. If we run tests centrally, that doesn't save downstreams anything from what I could tell. Like nobody downstream is going to turn off the tests that they're running today because they're like, oh, it got merged centrally. Because we all have like a weird squirrely, like, oh, we also had to backport this. Like we all will still have to do testing downstream. So I don't think that actually saves much of anything and costs a lot centrally.
I think that the subset of tests that we would run centrally doesn't have to be the full test suite. Like 5,000, 5,000 node scale testing, like maybe, but like probably not.
There's a spectrum. Maybe like, does the patch apply cleanly and does type check pass? Like, sure, that seems easy to maintain.
Yeah.
Like run a build and run E to E's, like that seems horrible to maintain. So maybe we're just like talking past each other about degree.
I think so. I think that sounds more
Again,
like
I think
what I'm
it's
thinking.
like it's the minimum test that we would need to run for the private KK anyway. So I feel like that's a good baseline.
I might want to separate that. just because the private aspect of that, every test we have in the whole project is public. So like asking for, in my mind, private test is like a different level of, maybe I'm wrong, but different level of hard.
No, I'm just saying
let's
this.
make
Yeah.
sure that folks with hands get to talk. So Zach,
Yeah.
go ahead.
This is a topic I care about, so I'm happy to go after this concludes.
Okay, let me put that back on the stack. What were we talking about? Oh, test. Like, so the the things that we run against branches that are still maintained and in support. The job of those tests is to make sure that unit integration, E2E tests, even scale tests, I guess. Like, we're still supporting branches. We're still releasing artifacts as a project. So the branches that are still under maintenance, I think, should be able to be tested in all of those dimensions in the private repo as well. And so I think we would want to run closer to the full set of tests in the private repo on maintained branches. On these like best effort patches back to even older out of support minor branches, I don't think that I would cut the tests way down that the project is running to like, does the patch apply cleanly and does it build?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, Zach.
So I think my topic is going to be related, which is like whatever amount of testing we land on now, it seems like we've got rough consensus on something that makes sense to me. Like, I'm sure that's going to evolve over time. Like, does this get back to like, how do we carve off a set of people that are empowered to figure out how to own and maintain these branches? Like, say we're 6 months from now, we're trying to maintain a branch, we're sharing patch sets, we're doing reviews, and we're realizing that, in addition to making sure the patch applies and type check passes, we should also run linting. Like I feel like that group needs to be empowered to opt into additional testing to make their lives easier in owning this stuff. Like, how do we set up the charter that's like not locking them into a specific set of decisions, but also how do we avoid debating a bunch of stuff that's just going to evolve over time anyway?
I think getting agreement on the scope of what's being provided and being super clear about what the project is promising or is not promising in terms of availability of the patches and how well qualified the patches have been. Like, scoping those things is the important part to get super clear. And then the mechanics of it, like, do we email patches and then review, or do we open it as a PR in a branch and do review there and then take the final patch and put it here? Like, the mechanics can evolve, I think, but what is being provided and what the project is promising in terms of qualification and availability, and like, what do these things mean in terms of project support? That's the thing that we have to get clear.
So I guess with trying to, because I know we're halfway through the meeting, like, what would be the way to capture those constraints? Like, should we collectively try to update Micah's proposal and have a longer list of non-goals that tries to capture some of these, like we're not trying to do full E2E. We are not trying to provide guarantees that somebody can just check out the code and build it, which opens the room to a folder of patch sets. And maybe there is a goal of, you can't just like check out the project and build it and think you're getting a completely secure thing because we're not doing go bumps. Like, is this really just fine tuning the goals and non-goals of the proposal, or is there like a different way we should be trying to codify some of this?
I think last time we said maybe we should start a new doc that's like focused on like a super targeted version of this. I don't know if it's easier to evolve the current one or like kind of take the kernel that I think we all do agree on and start with the kernel and then debate each step layered on top and out from that. whatever is easiest. It doesn't bother me. I'll let the people whose names are on the current doc weigh in.
Yeah, I'm fine with the new doc. I mean, I think like taking something fresh is fine. Like the purpose of this was for the discussion, not necessarily to say that this is the proposal or this is how it's going to be. Yeah.
You're up, Mo.
Okay, so this is maybe an incomplete thought, but I'll state it out there. Going back to a little bit on Jordan, when you said that it doesn't necessarily like maybe save as much time as we may hope. This is a little bit specific to how I guess we did it downstream, right? So the way we set up our LTS fork, it is a public repo in a public org with public prow, right? So we sort of duplicated Kubernetes stuff, right? So we already have a set of folks that are doing basically the exact set of work because they do have E2Es that do break and then they do go fix them sort of at a weird cadence. So in a sense, I could see those folks just stopping doing that and doing this instead because we still do all the internal specific scale testing and validations and whatever else is. So like we basically did net new. So we could just move the net new to a different place. And we already know those people exist because they have to do it. It's their job.
So you have
We have
three. You have the maintained core Kubernetes branches. Then you have public older branches that you're picking stuff back to and running full sets of tests. And then you have internal like mirrors that you have, additional fixes or like non-security things that
Yeah.
you
So
also run builds and tests on.
yeah, basically. I mean, the
Okay.
private stuff has to be private anyway, right? So we have to have the internal stuff anyway. And that internal stuff is the stuff that does the much more rigorous, like AKS specific testing anyway.
Yep.
So but I could see the part that we did in public just being turned off because it would be functionally replaced with a different thing. But we would then take those bodies and have them do that same work, right? So like, I guess I agree with you things with the same set of people, it's going to fall over. Did my internet just blow up?
Yeah,
we
you,
lost you.
you said, I agree with you, blank, the same set of people.
Okay, yeah. So I agree with you. If you try to take this existing set of people, like, I don't know, SRC members and said, hey, you SRC members, go start maintaining CI now. I don't think that's going to work out. But if we take the set of people who are effectively not Kubernetes org members, or at least not really, in the sense that they don't primarily work on Kubernetes in the upstream, and ask those people to do it because that's what they already do, I feel like we'll be more successful.
Yeah. I feel like we will be more successful starting with the smallest possible thing that accomplishes like the core goal we all agree on, and then building out from there rather than biting off more than we can chew. I see us like overcommitting as a project a lot, and it like then staffing changes and funding changes and people get busy and stuff just atrophies, and the promises we made or the things we committed to just go red and are bad. And so starting super targeted and super small, and then if that's going really well, like maybe add a smoke test. And if that's going really well and it's low toil and it's like staying green, like maybe we add like one more thing. But building up and out rather than saying like all this stuff we're just gonna do. I just don't see that going well when the project does that. You're up, Rita. Go for it.
I hear you. Like I said, I'm empathetic to all this, and which is kind of why I said the same thing in the last meeting, right? I feel like this is a good forcing function to get more people helping out with SIG release and SIG testing. I've always said that. And I think this is one way to do it because like Mo was saying and Micah was saying, we're all doing it, just not within the project. And if we all collectively say, hey, let's maintain things in this place and add more CI or whatever, then this is how we can get more people involved. And I know you're shaking your head because you're like, you know, kind of like, well, show me that you're committed, right? And I agree with you. And I think maybe part of this proposal, or, you know, start small, as you said, and the first thing we could do is each company come with people, right? Come with people and some kind of type of commitment.
I think it's a tough sell to say commit people and pay for more CI and pay for people to keep CI green, but the project's not gonna call these things officially supported. Like the more resources get devoted to it upstream, the more pressure there will be to call this supported in some way. And I think that's a mistake for the project.
But I think I really like your idea of starting small. I think to start, we don't have to say is supported, right? Like, not an official, once again, we're not cutting releases. All we're doing is just merging code. That's it. And so let's be honest, there are plenty of things under the Kubernetes umbrella that doesn't even do that. Right? Like, I think we don't have to promise the world to begin with. And as we mature, right? And if companies want to rely on it, depend on it, that's their prerogative, right?
Yeah. Go for it, Mo.
Would it make people feel better if we said that any infra-related costs must not be borne by the project? So we all have to go to our downstream people and, like, basically, for example, right, like we already set up an entire separate Prow instance for our LTS fork, right? So we could just repurpose it. So obviously the costs cannot be done, by definition, are not borne by the project for that infra because it's not your subs, right? It's our subs or whatever. It's like, if that is a concern, I think we can address it in that way, right?
I don't see any SIG testing folks on the call, but I mean, or infra folks. I'm sure they would be happy to, for the starting point to be like no new branches and repos and jobs. And our experiences with like out of project CI is mixed. Like we don't pay for it, which is great, but when it breaks, we also can't fix it. Like we depend on, you know, only the few people who have access to the thing to fix it. If this is all best effort anyway, then if something is blocked from merging, then the consequences are small, I guess. Yeah, I just the prior experiences we have with sort of non main path things like the private repo where we develop embargoed patches and CI for that, or CI on older branches, or centrally triaged and fixed CI jobs. Like the experiences haven't been great. And so I'm skeptical that this time it will be different. But if it doesn't cost the project anything, then it seems okay to let people who want to try. I'm sorry to be such a downer. You're
It seems like there's a failure mode to avoid here, and I don't know how to avoid it. But like, Mo, you're describing sort of a three-stage, like there's upstream, you've got your private testing downstream, and in between you've got this public fork. I think like a failure mode to avoid is we've got kind of like the upstream fully maintained branches and upstream LTS branches, and companies have to have a public fork, and there's downstream testing. Like if the if the outcome of this is that you can't get rid of the public fork because we haven't done enough testing on our like upstream LTS branches, that seems bad because then the people that maintain that the public fork can't come help out because they're still doing their job on the public fork rather than the LTS stuff.
I might have missed something in there, but like in my mental model, right, is you would do your whatever testing you do in the public, and then you do your private testing. But if your private testing finds an issue, you would go fix it in the public place, right? And perhaps maybe do some additional guards around that specific failure mode or whatever. But inevitably, the public state is correct because outside of private patches or your own special patches that you can't upstream for whatever reason, there isn't a different source of truth, right? So for the purpose of like LTS, right, KK is not relevant. It's just that public LTS thingy and your downstream testing. That's it. There's nothing else, right? And if you're a minor consumer who just wants like the LTS stuff, I guess, then you just consume the LTS stuff and hope that the downstream testing was sufficient because you're not doing it yourself. And if that's the I'll be honest, I think I've spoken about like how I like mentally map like using LTS software, right? Like I always use like Ubuntu LTS or some equivalent on any like Linux thing that I'm gonna have to take care of. And I tried not to touch it as much as possible and try to use as many little boxes of software to stay away from the OS as much as possible, right? I'm just trusting that Ubuntu LTS does some kind of testing, right? I have no idea what. That's like the level of effort I'm willing to put in. And I expect there's many other people that are okay with that level of effort and validation, which is that there's a vague base that seems to work and then I add my stuff on top and it seems to keep working and I'm happy. And if you need more than that, then you have to do more testing.
Since we're almost at time, or I guess we kind of are at time.
I
It's
just
a
want to
weird
have
meeting.
I
Just make
just
the
have one last comment because I keep
go for it.
hearing, is that okay?
Yeah.
I keep hearing Jordan repeat like we don't want to do it another branch. We don't want to do another branch. I don't think any of these proposals are saying that. Like I think we're saying forks, right? Just to clarify.
I mean, a branch or a fork. The
I
more
think
we qualify another thing, like it doesn't really matter. It's a distinction without a difference. Like whether
the
it's another
difference is
repo,
the difference is ownership and work, right? Who's going to have to do the work? And we
this
recognize
proposal
that.
trying to bring that into the project, like whether it's a different group within the project, like the whole point of this is to try to bring it into the project. And I'm saying I don't think the project has demonstrated that it can be successful doing that. Like the more like a folder of patches, I think we could be best effort patches where if no one contributes one, there just isn't one. Like I think we could be totally successful at that. I think that's useful. Like more CI, more shared stuff. Like I just don't think we'll be successful at it. And yeah, that's
So since we're at slightly over time now, I think what we'll do is probably try to put something together for maybe next time. To sort of scope down, like clarify based on a lot of this discussion, what the goals and non-goals are, and come up with something that kind of takes the core of this idea. I think just for argument's sake, we will propose a different SIG, like our own new SIG for this, just because it is a code owning SIG. It is a code owning body that has a different set of owners than other SIGs. Again, we can debate that, but unless anyone thinks that that's a horrible idea.
I have a hard time seeing like how it's sort of part of SIG release. It's sort of part of Arch for like compatibility supported versions, and it's sort of part of security response committee. Like I have a really hard time seeing carving out a charter that doesn't like usurp bits of those three things. So I would try to slot it under one of those if we can.
Okay.
Yeah. This reminds me of like the distinction between infra and testing. And that was super squirrely, and I'm still not entirely happy with where we landed there. Like, we still see weird things. We're like, who's responsible for this? Both of us. Neither of us. Yeah.
So to ask it, Jordan, where would you be happiest seeing this? Like if you could pick a place or an
I
existing
think the Security Response Committee is already coordinating the changes for the exact things we're talking about providing patches for, like vulnerabilities in Kubernetes code. So Security Response Committee already handles like tracking those vulnerabilities and pulling in the area owners and coordinating, construction of those patches and dissemination of those patches. The extra bit of like, also people adapted those patches to 1 or 2 or 3 or however many older branches, and here are those adapted patches. That seems like a natural extension of the security vulnerability fix process. And so that committee, like having a way to distribute those patches, seems like the smallest diff from what we have today.
And all the downstream people can go do their own tests and report back if there are issues. That's actually not a bad idea.
Yeah, which we're all already doing and
already
would
doing.
not be able to stop doing. That's the thing. Like, we all are adapting patches today, and if we collaborated, maybe we could like save ourselves some effort and time, and we could stop individually adapting patches. So that seems super useful. None of us can stop our downstream testing, even if we run tests centrally. So that seems like adding work and not saving work by collaborating. I would start there anyway.
Okay. We can call it. Thanks, folks.
Yeah. Thanks for joining and doing this again. Appreciate the conversation. It was a helpful discussion.
Yeah, at least it's not just me this time. Yay.
Thanks.
Good discussion.
Yeah.